Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev. Yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find.
Oh, there it is. Hi, everybody. How are you? Oh, my goodness, those words are so small. Do we need these captions to look a little bit bigger than that? I think we do. Oh, I think I know what's going on. I remember last time I was talking about having made a bunch of stuff, having had to scale a bunch of, captions for ants indeed, having had to scale a bunch of stuff for 720 because it makes sense since that's what I'm streaming, and it means that because your computer is creating a smaller format signal to send to Twitch, it should therefore require less resources. I know the video production end of it definitely makes a big difference. It does make it actually easier on your computer. So if you've got an old slow computer, set everything to 720 instead of 1080. Most people are not paying full attention to what you're doing anyway, or they're watching on a mobile device or anything else like that. It's usually only the streamer themselves who has, the really big fancy monitors and all that sort of stuff. But enjoy it yourself when you're playing on your own. And then when you're streaming, don't worry about it. I know of several really, really, really big name streamers who still use their early stream cams. I don't know if they still do, but they were not that long ago. Like people still using their 920, Logitech C920. Now, a Logitech C920 is well above the level that I started with, but that's what a lot of them did because if you're in the States, they were relatively cheap. In New Zealand, we had 270s, and you can still get them, and they still work, which is wonderful. And they don't have lots and lots of other model versions of them either because they just do their job, and they're better than the webcam that's on your laptop. For most people. Anyway, so if people are going to be streaming their actual camera as low pixel, why actually have your background here as being extra large? Because your computer has to process it. Just turn it down. But I didn't get all the way through the process because I was getting it all set up for hosting our commutation here. And so this screen, this scene, I left alone. The overlay for it and everything. But my caption setting is across the board for whichever scene I'm in, whether I'm playing a game or whether I'm talking, or you're on the title if I had my microphone turned on. It's just that because this scene itself has still been set up for the larger format, I just have to stretch it so you can see the words. So there you go. That was the intro ramble, which has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to be doing here today. So before we go any further, how about we have a tips video and then we can get on with the rest of our chit chat and other things. Not ants. I was going to write ants. No! And let's wait for it to arrive. I don't know why the videos are arriving so...
Hello. My name is Raccoon Z. In Z. That's right. 3 C's and 3 O's. Ha. So, welcome to the stream. We have many tips for you to help enjoy the stream. Number 1. Have a drink. I like water. As soon as my human helps me out here. So, another part of that is when I hydrate, when I take a drink, you do too. You can indicate that you've done so by giving a thumbs up or use the water bottle emoji down in chat. Number 3, sure, why not? Food or snacks. I don't have any right now, but you eat whatever you'd like to eat. Maybe it's a whole meal, maybe it's a snack. I don't know. You do you. Number 4, get comfy. You can wrap up in something. Thanks, human. That's more like it. Grab a pillow, maybe you've got a fidget toy you can play with. But do anything you like to be comfy. You could even have, I don't know, maybe your favorite human will give you scritches. Hey, human. That's right. Give me scritches. Yeah, that's right there. Yeah. No, don't touch the floof! Next, we have number 5, something to write with or write on. Hey, I can't reach the pad. There you go. And I need something to write on. I just said something to write. Oh wait, that's something to write on. I need something to write with. Okay. Okay, so I don't have opposable thumbs, but you do. Write memos down. You might need to remember something. Maybe not right now, but maybe after the stream. Number 6. Get involved. Join in chat. Chat in chat. Use commands. Play bingo because, that lady says some pretty crazy things from time to time. Make clips. You can even have them featured. Maybe we can see your clips someday. Spin the pages, which are like right down there somewhere. They look like a book or something. The thing down there with a number under chat. And just do whatever you can to enjoy chat. Thanks for watching.
Welcome, Void. Great to have you here too. Sorry, I was just in the middle of rearranging where the cat camera was, although the cat is not on his chair, because it all got rearranged when we had our commutation here on my channel. That was a lot of fun. I heard that some people were trying not to joke, laughing. And somebody was really pleased they hadn't made popcorn because they would have been having a hard time with that. Yeah. Shame about the accent and the beard, eh? There were more beards. I'm sure there were more beards. But yeah, we'll see. Breathing is for losers. Who needs that? I'm just going to test to see if this camera is pointing in the right place. But like I say, he's not sitting in his chair. So don't go redeeming anything on that at the moment. Just have to wait for it to load in. Oh, bother. I know why it's not loading in. Because I have to still go to it and refresh it as a source. At least I know this now. Deactivate it and reactivate it. No, that's the wrong thing. That one there. Oh, I just got a lovely message. And then reactivate it. Is it going to? Yes, it's going to. At least we know it's going to work now. So now I'm going to... No, go away. I don't need you telling me that the camera's allowed access. Sorry. My security suite gets a little bit needy. It has to tell me all the details. So there you go. Let's just... Oh, actually, I can probably... No, I can't. Yes, Void is an iridescent red panda. Oh, that's lovely. I like that. Let's go back here to this other view. We'll get this going. Because it needs to be set up to work properly. And yes, I could have possibly done it yesterday, but yesterday I was trying to catch my breath, and we've been doing some other real life stuff, sorting things out for other specific other specific purposes because of other things that us and my family are involved with. That kind of works, doesn't it? And we can probably bring... Oh, we can change the angle on it. That's a bit better. Yeah, that'll do. And I will turn that off again in a moment. Just wait. Void will bite good again. I hope that's a love bite, not an upset bite. Red pandas maybe bite things and people. Right, that can go there. This can come over there a bit, yes. And the weird bright corner, we'll just put up with that. Oh, no, that wasn't what I was trying to do. I was not trying to make it bigger. I was trying to trim the extra bits from the overlay. Right, there. Now I can turn the cat camera off. Just for now. Right, I think we're back to fairly normal. And yes, we do have this weird thing where my chat is in front of me. Why was that? There was a reason why. Oh yeah, because half of this stuff over here is not going to show up. Time for the picker of fortune. Thank you, Gorehi, for redeeming that. What are we going to get? Is it going to work? That's the bigger question. I don't know why those ears are so cropped. I thought I adjusted the image that's based on. Argos. Ooh, we've got Argos. We went through a stage a couple of years ago where Argos seemed to be showing up almost every time. Argos is the one with all the eyes. And these weird little bits here, that's because it's got green pipe cleaners, because there's meant to be floaty ones of these eyes on the end of them, so they're just sort of random eyes out here. But we didn't get that far, and I don't know where the glue gun is at the moment. So let's get an egg timer up. Oh, why have we got weird... Yeah, my green screen isn't back in its normal places with all the other bits and pieces again yet. So there's random stuff going on. Please ignore. The housekeeper didn't do her job. Egg timer. We have an egg. Where is egg? There's egg timer. I bet that sounds like egg timer to you guys. Egg timer. Let's put that down a bit lower so you can see it, and then we shall turn it on. Thank you for testing systems for me. Thank you indeed, Gorehi. That definitely helps. Right, so today, what have we got today? Just me doing my silly ramble, and also The Secret of the Caves by the Hardy Boys, and I do actually have the information for that. Let's find it and turn it on. There it is. Yay, it works. I had to hurriedly look up I had to look up when the book was published. That's what it was, because I couldn't remember. Let's move this over a little bit so it's not... Yeah, it jumps. That's because it's trying to snap to something. So let's put it there and leave it centered. That's fine. That'll do. Yay. We don't have game or music up there, so that's all right too. Anything else? I think that's it. I don't think there's any other stuff I need to deal with. So no games today, just me reading stories. There you go. And yeah, it's really, really warm here today. I had doors and windows open. I had skylights open, so we get a through draft. I'm hearing thunder. So when I saw what the weather report was and started to feel the extra moisture in the air that we get just before it rains, I shut the skylights, and then the wind changed direction. So it was coming in and blowing things around, and it was just uncomfortable and annoying and messy and all that sort of stuff. So I had to shut the doors on the end of the house so it's not too windy, but it makes it extra hot. It's like, yuck. So hopefully that thunder means that it is going to actually rain, and then the temperature will drop a little. I won't be changing my top for that though. And not unless it gets freezing cold, but we don't usually get that sort of sudden a change. It cools down, but that's all. So yeah, if you're really cold, I'm sorry, but putting extra layers on over here at the moment is not going to be happening to make you feel warmer. Just rug up, get nice and comfy with whatever layers that you need where you are. I was looking for something. What was I looking for? I don't think there's anything else I need to click on here. So we're going to read some... Not Disney Dreamlight. We're not going to read Disney We're not going to read Disney Dreamlight Valley. We're going to read The Secret of the Caves by Franklin W. Dixon. And I'm pretty sure we ended it somewhere that was a little bit of a cliffhanger. I hope you've got your water, your snacks, and any other drinks that you might want to be drinking, because I've got a feeling we're going to need them today. Yes. And yay, because I've got my camera view zoomed more correctly again. My microphone is out of sight for you guys. I mean, you can see it if you want to, but it doesn't help the experience really, I think, unless I'm doing ASMR, I suppose. But it also means I can see where my keys are. I type with my... No, that doesn't make sense. I type with my fingers. Yes, I do, rather than my nose or my toes, which apparently our commutation was doing part of the time last time. I touch type, but I also, if it's numbers and symbols, I tend to need to have to glance down to find them, because I'm not very good at remembering those, because it was a crash course in touch typing. It's been great. Who needs to go through 3 years of a specialised subject at school if you're not going to be doing secretarial work, and you can learn how to actually do the core skills on a 2-week crash course, which also included how to be a receptionist, which was actually a lot more complicated than being able to type. But yeah, it was brilliant. And I made that decision when I was at school. I didn't need to do typing as a key subject because I didn't see myself becoming a secretary or a typist or anything like that as a job working for somebody else. Sometimes you actually make the right decisions when you're in your teens, and sometimes not. But anyway, we won't go there. Let's open this book. Oh, there comes the thunder. I was a little disappointed hearing my voice in the playback from last stream, or our commutation's voice, at how crackly it got. I thought I'd set a limiter on the microphone. Maybe I was just leaning in too far. Maybe he was. I hope you guys had fun. So here we go. Chapter 10, The Cave. The boys gazed at one another in surprise. Where on earth did Joe disappear to? Exclaimed Biff Hooper. So let's just pause there for a moment, go back to the end of the previous chapter and find out what happened. Because we've had story reading, Disney Dreamlight Valley, and then we had our commutation here. So, yeah. None of us remember what was happening next. I'm going to read a little bit more than the last paragraph, because each of the last paragraph and the two before it are all actually just a short sentence. So we'll read a little bit more than that just to catch up with where we are. Frank was in the lead, Chet and Biff were next, and Joe brought up the rear. They could scarcely see one another in the gathering gloom because they're trying to get to where they're going to go and stay. On and on they went, heads bent to the storm, and to Chet especially, time seemed to stand still in a grey world. Oopsie, sorry, timer. Let's pause the timer, it's there. And take off Argos for now. Yes, I know the hair is doing weird things again. Let's just pretend it's not. And I know this is Disney Dreamlight Valley backdrop, but that was the last of my worries. Getting captions, let's turn the captions back on again. Getting captions working was more important. Right, so egg timer in view. Right, that's out of the way. Let's keep that where I can see it in case I need it again. Right. To Chet especially, time seemed to stand still in a grey world. Hardy boys and the stopping of the night thorns. Yes, and they would have found out who was behind it all. Us. And we needed to be in an asylum, because that's really the only logical explanation for the way a lot of that game works. Seriously. It changes your perception of the game when you realise this as a factor when you're playing it. Makes a lot more sense of some of the dialogue too. Suddenly Frank looked behind, then came to a stop. "Where is Joe?" he shouted above the clamour of the gale, because they've got this huge storm going on too. The others looked back. Joe had vanished. That was the end of the chapter. So it was a da-da-da moment at the end of the last reading stream. And then we start off on chapter 10, The Cave. So I'll properly started. The boys gazed at one another in surprise. "Where on earth did Joe disappear to?" exclaimed Biff Hooper. They peered into the grey oblivion of the storm, but the rain was teeming down in such heavy torrents, and the gloom was so intense that it was impossible to see more than 20 yards away. Don't forget our keywords, by the way. "We'll have to go back," decided Frank quickly. "He probably sat down to rest and got lost when he tried to catch up with us again." They retraced their steps over the rocks, keeping close together. They shouted again and again, but in the roar of wind, rain, and thunder, they knew there was little chance that Joe would hear them. "I never thought to look back," said Chet. "I thought he was right behind us." "Same here," declared Biff. "He might have dropped back 5 or 10 minutes ago and we didn't know it." The search seemed hopeless. It was late in the afternoon and already getting dark. Once in a while they stopped and listened, hoping to hear some faint cry from Joe, but there was nothing. "Perhaps he fell down and hurt himself," suggested Frank. "He may be lying behind some of these big rocks and we can't see him. Let's have a drink for rocks." Rock or rocks, I don't really care. We're having it. We are drinking to rocks. Or even for rocks. Because of them, on their behalf. The boys searched patiently. Joe Hardy was nowhere to be found. They did not dare scatter for fear of losing one another, but they hunted among the rocks, realizing the hopeless nature of their quest. No, that's the wrong one. That was water. This is rocks. At last they halted, standing in a little group with rain pouring down on them. Frank expressed the fear that they had all held for the past few minutes. "I wonder if he could have fallen off the cliff." They had been going along within a few yards of the uneven edge of the cliff, and they realized that in the rain and the dim light it would have been easy for Joe to have stumbled into the abyss. They turned sick at the thought of the frightful plunge, ending in certain death had he tumbled over the verge. Suddenly, above the roar of the storm, they heard a faint cry. "Listen!" cried Frank. Breathlessly they waited. Again the cry. "Help! Help!" It was from almost at their feet. Frank ran quickly forward. At the very edge of the cliff he stopped and peered down. Over to one side, a few feet below the top of the sheer wall of rock, he spied a dark figure. It was Joe. He seemed to be clinging directly to the side of the cliff. Hastily shouting to the others, Frank ran across the rocks until he came to a place immediately above where he had seen his brother. He flung himself flat and peered over into the dizzy depths. Oh, my phone. Sorry, I'm just going to check this because it might be actually quite urgent. It doesn't usually interrupt me because I've got it on Do Not Disturb. Severe thunderstorm warning. Not a watch, not an alert. This is a warning, which means that it's like to happen. So if suddenly it gets really loud here or I disappear, we've had a momentary power cut or a longer power cut. I don't know. But if a power cut happens, if my stream drops out, hang around on the channel for a little while and maybe refresh it, because I may be able to get back on, because sometimes what happens is we will get a really, really, really short temporary power cut, and then all the systems will come back on. And if that happens, I will turn my computer on, I'll wait till the router and the modem have all restarted, and then I'll just carry on from where we got to. Okay, so don't disappear. So severe thunderstorm warning and a heavy rain watch, as well as a severe thunderstorm watch. So yeah, I can hear the rain on the chimney. The forecast was at 1:07 p.m. It's now 1:24. Met Service weather radar detected severe thunderstorms in your area and a bunch of others. These severe thunderstorms are moving towards the southeast and are expected to lie in another area nearer to the city and the inner harbour a bit later on. that rain is definitely happening now. Hang around for 10 to 15 minutes. It takes a while. Yes, good point. Thank you, Goriki. So I can have the, we're trying to get the streamer connected again thingy that Twitch does. That'll run for a little bit, but then when that times out, it'll disappear and it'll just say I'm not live. But yeah, if you hang around on the channel, even if you're doing something else, and maybe, I don't know, some people's will auto refresh and other ones don't. But yeah, it does take a while. So I'm just telling you, these thunderstorms are expected to be accompanied by very heavy rain. Well, usually you don't get a thunderstorm around here without rain. So I'm not quite sure why they're telling us that. That's like, duh. Rain amounts may approach warning criteria and possibly exceed them in downpours. Warning criteria are sort of where they bump it up so it's a red alert because there's a heavy risk of flooding and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so there you go. Weather. Hey, how's the weather where you are, eh? Yeah, it flashed up on my screen that we had that alert, so that's why I thought I'd better check. But also it means I can tell you guys if I suddenly disappear, that's possibly why. Hopefully it doesn't. We'll see. Let's carry on. And just remember, this next paragraph I've already read before, so I don't need to drink water for it. Hastily shouting to the others, Frank ran across the rocks until he came to a place immediately above where he'd seen his brother. He flung himself flat and peered over into the dizzy depths. Just beneath, he could see Joe's white... Sorry, the chat's in the way, it's a bit big. He could see Joe's white face. His brother was clinging to a small bush growing out of the side of the cliff. Had the bush been his only support, he would not have been able to maintain his hold, but fortunately there was a ledge of rock a few inches wide in which he had managed to implant his feet. Thus he had clung on to the face of the cliff rock. "Quick!" shouted Frank to the others. He realized the need for haste. "He's here!" "I can't hold on much longer," called Joe in a strained voice. "We'll get you out of this," Frank assured him, but his heart sank when he saw that Joe was beyond his reach. Biff and Chet came running up, and Frank tersely explained the situation to them. "There's only one thing to do," he said. "Both of you hang on to me while I lower myself over." We've seen this in comedy movies, haven't we? And in early action movies. Biff peeped over the edge of the cliff. "You'll never make it," he said. "You'll both be killed." "Yeah, you will, because you'll be landing on your head." "We're not going to stand idle until he gets exhausted and lets go of his hold." "I thought they had rope with them. Didn't they say they had rope with them?" declared Frank. "It's the only chance, and I'm going to take it." He flung himself down and began to edge forward until he was leaning far over the verge. Biff and Chet seized his ankles and set themselves by digging their heels against the rocks. Just as well as rocks, because dirt crumbles away. Bit by bit, Frank lowered himself head first over the side. His outstretched hands were but a few inches away from Joe's wrists. Joe still clung to the bush that had saved his life. Frank dared not look down, for he was hanging at a dizzy height. He closed his eyes. "A little more," he called out. He swung lower and gripped Joe's wrists. He secured a tight hold. There was no time to lose, as he knew it would take every ounce of strength he possessed to drag his brother back to safety, and he was growing weaker all the time. Now, at this point, his only job is to hold on, because the pulling has to be done by the other guys. There's no way you can concertina your body upwards, your full weight being suspended by your ankles, as well as the full weight of somebody else. So it's now up to the other boys to pull him up. "Ready, Joe?" "All right," gasped Joe. "Haul away!" Chet and Biff began dragging Frank back. There was a double weight now, for Joe relaxed his grip on the root to which he had been clinging and was now dangling in space, supported only by Frank's firm grip on his wrists. Frank had no idea that his brother weighed so much. The strain was terrific. Gradually, however, he was drawn back to safety. For one horrible moment, he thought he was losing his hold on Joe's wrists as their locked hands reached the edge of the precipice. But Chet, leaning forward, seized the back of Joe's Sorry, physics. Let's just pretend physics doesn't actually apply at the moment. Chet, leaning forward, seized the back of Joe's shirt, clung to him while Biff scrambled over, and together they hauled him onto the rocks. Just talking about their wrists going up over the edge, and yet Chet leaned forward and grabbed Joe's shirt, which means his head is down below the level of the cliff. No, that's just artistic license. I'm sorry, that's not how physics works in real life. Physics of levers and lengths and distances, but let's let them have that one anyway. Together they hauled him onto the rocks, and I went and put the water bottle away. For a moment, neither of the Hardy boys could say a word. They were so exhausted by the ordeal. Above them, the storm still raged. The rain still poured from the black skies. The lightning still flickered, and the thunder still boomed and rumbled. "Boy, that was a narrow squeak," said Chet solemnly at last. "Don't talk about it," said Joe, closing his eyes as though to shut out the memory of the sight. "I can still see the waves away down beneath me. I was never so near death in my life." "We'll stick closer together after this. How did it happen?" Frank asked. "I stopped to tie my shoelace. When I looked up again, I couldn't see you chaps at all, so I began to run to catch up. I didn't realise I was so near the edge of the cliff. Then some of the rock must have broken off under my feet because everything gave way and I felt myself falling." And we're already over a third of the way down the water in the rocks bottle. "You're mighty lucky you're here to tell us about it," said Biff. "I'll say I am. I just managed to grab that root growing out of the side of the cliff, and I hung there until I thought my arms would be pulled out of their sockets. I thought I'd never be able to hold on until you found me. It was quite a while before we missed you. At any rate, I couldn't have held on, but I managed to find that ledge and got my feet on it. That rested me. I was certainly glad when I heard you fellows shouting for me." So it was good that the others had actually shouted, even if they didn't think he could hear them. Recovering somewhat from their grueling experience, Frank and Joe Hardy got to their feet. "Let's run for it." "He was running to catch up when the rocks collapsed and he fell over the cliff. Let's run for it," says Chet. Does it work? Nope. Let's try this one. No, not headband. Yes. "Let's run for it," suggested Chet. "We're drenched to the skin as it is, but I don't want to stay out in the storm any longer than I have to." With one accord, the boys resumed their journey over the rocks. And they're running over rocks. Chet, the well-documented least athletic. Yeah, it's because he's not a sporting type that he wants to get out of the rain, apparently. Sorry. Let's drink from the shame bottle. That was me calling it that time. Saying something that was a little bit derogatory. In a short, with one accord, the boys resumed their journey over the rocks. We drank that one. This time no one lagged behind. For safety's sake, they stayed close together and well away from the verge of the cliff. Yay! Should have said that first. In a short time, Frank gave a cry of delight. "The ravine!" he yelled, which is another set of cliffs, but it's one that's inland, not over the water. They scrambled toward it. The ravine was deep and the slope was steep, but they had been fortunate in reaching it just at a point where a path led down among the rocks. Far below they could see the beach and the breaking rollers, slipping and stumbling. Oh, led down among the rocks. Sorry. I don't know why. No, I didn't put the light on. I thought I had. Yeah, we're definitely at the halfway mark on that water now. Slipping and stumbling, the boys made their way down the steep, winding path in the downpour. The storm was unabated. Its violence, on the contrary, seemed to have increased. The rain came down in sheets. Halfway down the path, Joe gave a cry of excitement. "A cave!" Yay! He pointed down toward the base of the cliff, just visible from the path. There, but a short distance from the breaking waves, was a dark hole in the steep wall of rock. End of chapter. And finally, we're at the part where we actually find out about what the story's about, because sometimes we have so much building of story, we get to the halfway mark before it actually starts happening. Next chapter. Chapter 11, Footsteps in the Night. I'm going to just see if I can make this chat a little bit more of a suitable size, because it's really irking me. And then we'll carry on with the chapter. I have no idea why that just did what it did then. Chat widget, let's put that at the top so I can actually resize it. And let's also see what the... No, that one's not it. Settings. Test, no. I could do test. Chat message options, that one. I thought it had something about the text size. No, we're just going to make it so it's not quite so big, that's all. Can't do anything about the size of the words. And yes, they're going to disappear and then they're going to come back once we start typing again, just because I've saved that setting, so the panel doesn't stick out so far across the page. Right, let's carry on. Chapter 11, Footsteps in the Night. So it's been a pretty hair-raising chapter so far. Lots of action, because I know some of these sort of books don't seem to have much action at all. Mainly the ones written for the girls, sadly. With the goal in sight, the Hardy Boys and their chums hastened down the treacherous path along the steep side of the ravine. The path was slippery and little rivulets of water ran at their feet. Water. Opening a new bottle of water. And I'll leave that one there ready to go as well. And I think I can just leave that phone currently disconnected. It's in my way and causing problems, being in my way. So there. Now I don't have to worry about the water bottles so much. The path was slippery and little rivulets of water ran at their feet. Chet Morton slipped and went sprawling in the mud, getting to his feet with exclamations of disgust. Oh, well, he said philosophically. That is not an exclamation of disgust. I can't be any wetter than I am already, Frank consoled him. When we get to that cave, we'll light a fire and dry ourselves out a bit. They at length reached the floor of the ravine, where little streams of water were coursing from the upper levels to the sea. You guys better be drinking your water too. All of this me drinking water, you're meant to be as well, and you're meant to be acknowledging it in chat. From the upper levels to the sea and splashing across to the beach. It was only a few yards from there to the black entrance of the cave, which was well above the reach of high tide. I wonder if it's this cave that's just in the edge of the picture here. If you look up that cover online, just type in The Secret of the Caves, Franklin W. Dixon, and one of the pictures at least is going to be of that cover. And that's probably what that's meant to be representing. Just what is there philosophically to exclaim about being rain-drenched? I know. I don't think they know how to use English sometimes, and the authors don't. They're trying to be a little bit more... It's because they're trying to write elaborately to make the books slightly educational as an excuse to parents or grandparents or great aunts and uncles who might be hesitant about buying an action story book, an adventure story book for their young relatives, because we don't want to corrupt them and not have them learning something important. I think often the big words are based on that. So let's just assume that that's what's going on, and I don't care if it's going to make an ass out of you and me, but we're going to assume anyway. Let's assume as hard as we can. Right. Which was well above the reach of the height. Forsooth, Joe, thou art coated in heaven's dew, but as but a fish could be, plus mud. Yeah, very definitely. They almost seem like that, some of the big words, especially in the first few chapters. They do the biggest words in the first few chapters, and the ones that are the most awkwardly phrased. It was only a few yards from there to the black entrance of the cave, which was well above the reach of high tide, unlike that one there, which doesn't look like it's very far above high tide, actually. Frank led the way. He took a flashlight from his pack as the boys hastened into the dark mouth of the cavern. They were in shelter at any rate, and they could look out at the streaming rain and feel thankful that they had a roof over their heads, although that roof was a rocky one. Frank directed the beam of the flashlight into the gloomy interior, and in its gleam he saw that their shelter was no mere niche in the face of the cliff, but a cave that led to dark and unknown depths. Do you remember ever being the age where... No, we'll do that after. We'll get to the end of the chapter. Looks as if we can start our exploring right here and now, he said. Explore my neck, grumbled Chet. Let's have a fire. My neck. Why my neck? It's not a common usage term for a substitute word in when you're trying to emphasize something. My neck. No, explore my neck. Let's have a fire. How about firewood? Inquired the practical Biff. This had not occurred to the others. They glanced at one another in dismay. That's right too, said Joe. There's not much wood around these rocks, and it's all wet by now anyway. Rocks. Nothing but driftwood, Frank observed disconsolately. The rain has drenched it. He glanced out, and along the shore he spied a few bits of wood tossed up by the waves, but they were sodden and useless because they've been soaking in the seawater for a while. This is going to be fine, said Chet. We'll have to shiver here all night without a fire, a great beginning to our visit. To tell the truth, the boys were feeling none too cheerful over the prospect, for they were all cold, wet, and hungry, and they had been looking forward to dry clothes and a hot meal by a roaring fire, but now it seemed that they were doomed to spend the night in the cheerless shelter of a damp, cold cave without the vestige of a blaze, without the slightest remnant, vestige. Thank goodness our blankets are dry at any rate, said Joe philosophically. Well, this is assuming that their backpacks are waterproof. Hello, you. What are you doing? Someone's checking out the rearranged items. Yes, that's a light for the green screen. Do you want to hop up so you can get some treats? He's blinking because he's looking into the light as he was coming past it. I've got a little desk lamp sitting on the floor, shining at the bottom half of the green screen because it was going weird before. See you later. Bye-bye. Oh, you're coming back. Are you going to have treats? Up. Treat seat. You have to hop in the seat. If you want treats, you have to hop in the seat. Oh, you want to come over so you can say hello to everybody? Yes, come on then. Yeah. Yeah. Don't protest if you come over and insist on being right here. Say hello to everybody. Look up higher. No, looking at the desk. That's you. There you go. You can hop on there. There you go. Right. Let's find him some treats. You going to sit? Good boy. Hang on, let's do a camera. Cat. Oh, this one here. It's got a different name at the moment. Good boy. The reason it says in chat that it's Theodore and I that are chilling, it's because I did the redeem. So if you want to get your name on screen, some of the redeems actually show your name as part of it, as the actual response, not just telling us that someone redeemed something. Good boy. There you go. You can finish licking my fingers, just because he insists on it. I am going to move the chair sometimes so it's nearer to behind me, but I think I'm going to need to use a different chair, one that doesn't have such a high back on it, so it's not part of the... when it... Gone. Right. He's decided that's enough because he's got his treats. He's off. I hope you've got treats. Let's carry on. Thank goodness our blankets are dry at any rate, Joe said philosophically. Frank moved... We've got... What else have we got going on? More philosophically. Yeah. Frank moved further back into the cave with the flashlight illuminating the way. Suddenly he gave an exclamation of mingled astonishment and delight. Well, can you beat this, fellas? What have you found? Firewood. That means somebody's either here or somebody uses this on a regular basis, I think. Where? The others came hastening over to Frank Hardy. Look! Frank cast the beam of the flashlight against the black wall nearby, full in the centre of the circle of radiance. How many big words can we shove into a sentence? Light. We're not going to use the word light. We're going to come up with a really important word, and this word is radiance. The circle of radiance. Sounds like something that Jev would have for headbands. Full in the centre of the circle of radiance, they saw a neat pile of wood. It had not been placed there by accident. That much was certain. It had been stacked carefully by human hands. Frank stepped over and picked up one of the sticks. Good dry driftwood. We don't have to worry about a fire now. I wonder who on earth piled it in here, remarked Biff. Chet shrugged. Why worry about that? The main thing is that some thoughtful soul has been kind enough to put it here, and we're the boys who are going to use it. Where shall we light the fire, Frank? Right here, I guess. This is far enough back from the entrance so that we won't have to worry about the rain beating in. It's certainly odd how that wood comes to be here, though. Probably the mysterious chaps who were doing all the yelling and shouting, said Biff. We'll be out of luck if this is their cave we've stumbled on. It's ours now. I don't see any no trespassing sign. Frank began carrying wood over to the centre of the cave. I would have looked around with a torch to see if it looks like there's somewhere there that people normally light fires, because that usually means that it's well suited to it. Then he set down the flashlight, took out his pocket knife and whittled at a particularly dry stick until he had a small heap of shavings. Carefully stacking a few of the smaller sticks over the shavings and the larger sticks above crosswise so there was plenty of air spaces, he took a match from his waterproof case and ignited it, putting it to the shavings. They flared up brightly. Anxiously, the boys watched the little blaze. The flames caught the small sticks, which snapped and crackled. Then, as the fire rose higher, the heavier wood was ignited, and in a short time the boys had a roaring fire. Never had a campfire been so welcome. Frank had been afraid that the lack of a draught in the cave might cause so much smoke that they would be almost smothered, but evidently there was some opening in the roof, some overhead passage that acted in the nature of a chimney, for the smoke was carried off above. It wasn't even going along the roof and then out the front. It's going up through the ground somewhere. As the warmth of the fire penetrated the cave, the boys took off their drenched clothes and spread them about the blaze, in the meantime wrapping themselves in the heavy blankets they'd brought with them. Chet produced the frying pan, and the fragrant odour of sizzling bacon soon permeated their refuge. He improvised a tripod from which was suspended a tin pail, duly filled with rainwater that coursed in a gushing stream just beside the mouth of the cave. How very convenient. Rainwater. Water. And in a short time the coffee was boiling. The boys never enjoyed a meal more than they enjoyed their supper in the cave. The driftwood blazed and crackled, casting a cheerful glow, illuminating the rocky ceiling and walls of the underground chamber. I'm going to say rocky relates to this. With crisp bacon, bread toasted brown before the fire, hot coffee and jam, they ate ravenously and at last sat back with deep sighs of sheer content. "This old cave isn't so bad after all," said Chet, wrapping his blanket around him like a cocoon and wriggling his toes toward the flames. The others glanced towards the entrance of the cavern. It was pitch dark outside and still raining. They could hear the constant beat of the downpour, the incessant roar of the surf, the splash of the waves, the moaning of the cold wind out in the blackness of the night, and the cave seemed the most comfortable place in the world. "We owe a vote of thanks to the chap who stacked this driftwood in here," said Biff. "I'll tell the world," declared Joe. We've been shivering and hungry yet if it hadn't been for him." "Wonder who he could have been," mused Frank. "Perhaps somebody who was down here searching for the smugglers or bootleggers or whoever has been raising all the fuss around here," his brother suggested. "He hasn't shown up yet," Chet remarked cheerfully. He looked out into the storm and shivered. "Somehow I have an idea he won't be along tonight either," he added, edging nearer the fire. "I guess we'd better have a good night's sleep and then start our exploring tomorrow," Frank said. "We can start right on this cave, for that matter. It seems to lead back for quite a distance." "Sleep sounds good to me," Biff yawned. Although part of the floor of the cave was rocky, much of it was sand, which provided a fairly comfortable resting place. The boys were tired after their long journey, so they wrapped themselves up in their blankets and were soon drowsily chatting, while the fire died lower and lower. At last only the embers glowed crimson in the darkness. Chet Morton was already snoring. Soon all were asleep. The fire was a scarlet eye in the blackness of the cave. Beyond the entrance rain still poured in a seemingly endless torrent, and the surf roared dully. An hour passed. 2 hours. Something's gonna happen. Joe, who had been sleeping soundly, was awakened. At first he did not realize where he was. Could not imagine why he was sleeping on the ground, wrapped in a heavy blanket, and then it gradually came back to him and he remembered about the cave. He was just about to turn over and go to sleep again, wondering vaguely what had aroused him, when he heard a footstep. It came from close by. He listened, and then he heard it again. Someone was moving cautiously about in the darkness. Joe raised himself on one elbow and peered into the gloom, but he could see nothing. However, he reasoned that it was probably only one of his chums. When he heard a rustle, he spoke. "Is that you, Frank?" Words rang out clearly in the silence of the cave, but the consequence was surprising. Instead of the reassuring voice of his brother, Joe heard a muffled exclamation, quick footsteps as someone ran across the floor of the cave, and then the crash of a fallen rock. End of chapter. What's happening? Oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? I'm pulling that face because that used to be something that we had a command for, I think. Just trying to get it so I can see my little clock. Right. Chapter 12. A Disappearance. "Who's that?" demanded Joe Hardy, scrambling to his feet. There was no answer. He heard the sound of running footsteps, gradually growing fainter. "Hey there," he shouted, now thoroughly aroused. "Fellas, wake up!" He stumbled around in the darkness, trying to find his flashlight and his chums. Then he heard Chet's sleepy voice. "What's the matter? It isn't morning yet. Let me sleep." "Wake up! There's someone prowling around in here." "What's that?" called out Frank from the darkness. "It was someone else in the There was someone else in the cave just now. He woke me up." Perhaps it was only Biff. "Hey, Biff!" A deep sigh, then Biff mumbled, "What do you want?" "Wake up!" Frank switched on his flashlight and he turned it on each member of the startled group. "Everybody here?" "Sure," replied Biff, sitting up in his blanket. "What's wrong?" "Joe says somebody was prowling around in the cave." "Wasn't me. I've been sleeping like a log." "Wasn't me either," spoke up Chet. "I guess I was right then," declared Joe. "There really was somebody. I thought for a minute it might be one of you playing a trick on the rest of us." "We're all accounted for," said Frank. He got up and tossed a stick of wood on the embers of the fire. In a few minutes it began flaming up brightly, casting a circle of illumination through the cave. "Tell us about it, Joe." Joe thereupon told of hearing the mysterious footsteps in the cave, of calling out, and of hearing the exclamation, the crash of the rock, and the running footsteps as the intruder fled. "Did he go out the front way?" Joe shook his head. "No, he seemed to go back further into the cave. Toward the back." "Yeah, that's what I thought was happening." "Well then," said Frank decisively, "we'll just go and look for him. If he went that way, he's in the cave yet." "Oh, let's look for him in the morning," protested Chet as he rubbed his eyes. "I think Joe was dreaming." "It was no dream. I heard him walking around. Wasn't any of us, so it must have been a burglar or somebody." "Yeah. Oh, look, there's a cave. I'll go and burgle it." Teenage boys, huh? Oh, my goodness. "Perhaps it's the chap who piled up all that wood," said Frank. "Maybe he's come back to get his wood." "Give me your wood, boys. Give me your wood. All of your wood. Stick 'em up. Give us your wood." Yeah, weird. "Maybe this is his cave, and when he came in and heard Joe call out, he got frightened and ran." That sounds more reasonable. "Anyway, we'll take a look around for him. He can't be far away." The boys hurriedly dressed. They were soon wide awake, excitement having banished all desire for further sleep. "We were going to explore in here anyway," said Frank as he took the flashlight and led the way toward the back of the cave. So far, Frank seems to be the only one who's actually carrying around a flashlight. Joe was looking for his, but we didn't hear tell of anyone finding it. The boys confronted an arch in the rock. "Hey, you arch! What are you doing there?" That's confronting. The boys confronted. No, they approached. They saw. They found. They arrived at. Confronted. They were confronted by an arch. That means it was there and they weren't expecting it, or it's going to cause a problem because it's a barrier. Sorry, not all reporters are good at writing narrative. But let's read the story and enjoy it anyway. The boys confronted an arch in the rock, an opening that seemed to lead into a tunnel. They approached it cautiously, and Frank often turned the light on the floor to make sure that no pitfalls lay before them. Well, you should probably be doing that all the time, not just sometimes, actually. Frank went into the tunnel first. In single file, the others followed. It was about 15 feet in length and about 6 feet high. Oh, that's handy. Just the right size for people to walk through. As the floor was of solid rock, they were unable to find any footprints that would serve to prove that the intruder had passed that way. The tunnel led to another cave. "Why, there's a regular chain of caves here," exclaimed Joe. They were told there were caves, not a cave. "I'm sure," as the boys stepped out into a massive underground chamber. "Our cave was only the beginning," said Chet. In the glow of their flashlights, they saw that the cave in which they now stood had a number of dark openings in the walls. "It's like it's a mine or something." These were presumably tunnels leading into further caves beyond. There are a dozen different passages out of here. Our friend might have taken any of them," said Frank. "We'll tackle the biggest," suggested Biff. Good idea. If we don't get anywhere, we'll try the others. The largest tunnel was immediately ahead. Frank accordingly stepped into the gloomy passage. The others followed. When I was going to sleep tonight, I never thought I'd wake up and take part in an exploring trip underground before morning, observed Chet. Frank gave an exclamation. Here's what we were looking for, he cried. What? A footprint. The others crowded round him, clearly discernible in the radiance. I'm sorry. The words are just... I'm glad that Becky's still here. Carrying on. Clearly discernible in the radiance of Frank's flashlight, the lads could see the imprint of a boot in a patch of wet sand on the floor of the tunnel. Looks like a fresh track too, said Joe. We're on the right trail. Let's keep moving. With increasing excitement, the chums pressed forward, and in a few moments Frank stepped out of the passage into another cave. This was the largest cave of all. Well, you don't know that. It's just of the ones you've seen, because some of the ones that are up the little wee thin passages that you haven't gone up yet may actually terminate in a bigger cave. Becky, just stay with me, please. I think I might need you. There you go. You can just keep an eye on everybody for me. With increasing excitement, the chums pressed forward, and in a few moments Frank stepped out of the passage into another cave. This was the largest cave of all, an enormous underground vault, and even the flashlight beams failed to reveal the rocky walls and ceiling. Rocky. The floor was rough, and broken fragments of rock were strewn about. Watch your step, warned Frank as he made his way across the cave. The others had flashlights, and the floor was well illuminated as the boys slowly picked their way among the rocks. The far wall of the huge cavern was still invisible. This is a whopper, said Joe in an awed whisper. Frank stopped with a murmur of annoyance. What's the matter? Said Chet. My flashlight. It's on the blink. I'm sorry, I just need to type something. I think this might be a key point. I think we've got a bit of foreshadowing going on here. Yes. My flashlight is on the blink. Vainly Frank tried to coax a gleam from the refractory instrument. It was of no use. He put the light in his pocket. No, the light was not there. He put the torch in his pocket. I'll have to fix it tomorrow, he said. It won't work any more tonight by the look of things. Here's mine, offered Biff, but Frank declined. No thanks, one of you chaps take the lead for a while. I can follow easily enough. Joe took the lead as Frank suggested, and the little party moved on again. It was rough going. The floor of the... I'm not sure how they're going to know which of the tunnels is the one they came out of to be able to get back to their food and everything. The floor of the cave became piled high with rocks, evidently from cave-ins that had occurred in times past, which means that the roof up above you is not stable, and it could happen again at any minute. In other parts, it was pitted with little gullies and holes, and trying to avoid these, the chums gradually became separated. Somebody else can type foreshadow in there. Frank stumbled along behind. He felt the loss of his flashlight, but said nothing, relying on finding his way by the radiance provided by the lights carried by the others. Soon, however, the three lights became scattered. We've already had to find somebody because no one was keeping an eye on where everybody else was. So now that we've had somebody whose torch no longer works, we're going to once again ignore everybody else and just look at where we're looking at and not worry about if anyone else is nearby or if anyone else is okay, especially when we know somebody has a non-working torch. Soon, however, the 3 lights became scattered. Joe had gone to one side to avoid a huge boulder. Chet had gone to the other side and encountered a pit that prevented him from returning to Joe's trail. Biff had tried to follow Chet and had blundered into a labyrinth of rocks. Frank stood uncertainly for a moment, then called out, "We're getting separated. Wait for me." The walls of the great cave flung back the echoes time and again. He heard Joe shout, "Where are you?" Had it not been for the glow of Joe's light, he would never have known where the voice came from, because the echoes confused him and the tones seemed to come from all parts of the cave. Frank realized that his own shouts would cause the same confusion to the others. "Don't move around," he called. "I'll head toward one of the lights." Have a guess at what's going to happen now? But evidently his order was misunderstood. He should have said stay still. When you're giving directions and there's difficulty for people hearing, keep it as short and concise as possible. No elaborate words. Stay still. And then if they ask, then you can say, "I'll follow the light," or something. "I'll head toward one of the lights." That's too many words because the sounds bounce off each other in the rocky cave. But evidently his order was misunderstood, for one of the lights began to move erratically through the darkness. Maybe it's the bad guy running away. Frank went forward. He blundered against a rock and fell, bruising his knees. He got to his feet and went on, still in the direction of the nearest glow. He was confused by the moving lights. Had his own flashlight not failed him, this would not have happened. Suddenly, he stumbled. He lurched forward. His foot groped wildly for the firm rock, but there was nothing to stop his plunge. He had fallen into a pit of despair. Straight down through the blackness he hurtled, with a wild cry of terror. The others heard that cry. They heard a far-off crash, and then the clatter of falling rock. Joe was the first to shout. "Frank!" he called. There was no answer. The echoes rang back. Although the other boys shouted time and again, there was no answer from Frank Hardy. They searched frantically, casting the beams of their lights here and there, but they found no trace of him. End of chapter. So what I had been going to say, and I stopped myself in time because ramble otherwise, was, did you ever daydream about finding a cave and going exploring and having adventures? Because that's a lot of what's going on here. So, yeah, when they're comfortable again, they'll enjoy the adventure, but at the moment they're not. So we'll carry on. Chapter 13, Stolen Supplies. Oh dear. So somebody's in the caves and knows their way around the caves a bit better than the boys. The other boys searched for nearly an hour, but Frank Hardy seemed to have disappeared literally into the bowels of the earth. With only their flashlights to illuminate the huge cave, they found it difficult to conduct the search with any degree of satisfaction. They blundered here and there, not at all certain that they were anywhere near the place where their companion had disappeared. They found several deep pits in the floor of the cave, natural crevices and holes in the rock, but although they shouted at the tops of their lungs, they heard no answering cry from below. "He must have fallen down one of these holes, that's certain," Joe declared. "I'm sure we haven't missed any." "Why doesn't he call back then?" said Biff. I was thinking initially that he was winded, but if he got knocked unconscious? In the glow of the flashlights, the boys glanced at one another anxiously. Joe expressed the thought that the others were afraid to put into words. Perhaps he can't. "Do you think he may be dead?" asked Chet quietly. "We'll hope not," sighed Joe, "but when he doesn't answer, things don't look any too bright. Any of these crevices may be hundreds of feet deep for all we know. So I think they mean like the equivalent of a crevasse in a glacier, rather than just a crevice, which seems like just a little nook or a cranny, a little tiny angle. It will be a terrible end to our trip if anything like that has happened." Not much use waiting for morning, declared Biff. This cave is just as dark in daytime as it is right now. Presumably. We don't know. There may be holes in the roof that let light in. I sure wish we had a few more flashlights, or more powerful ones. We can't see very far down the crevices in the rocks with these lights. The boys talked in low tones. They were awed by the thought of what might have happened to Frank Hardy. In their ears still rang that last dreadful cry, and they could still hear the crashing of rocks as their companion hurtled into the depths. Even now his mangled body might be lying in some subterranean pit from which it would be impossible to recover it. Joe shuddered. They listened in vain for some faint cry, but there was nothing but the echoes of their own voices. "We won't give up for a while yet," said Joe, with as much steadiness of voice as he could muster. "We'll search around every pit and hole we can find. I can't believe he was killed." Keeping close together, the lads slowly crossed the floor of the cave. When they reached an opening in the rocks, they directed the beams of their 3 flashlights into the shadowy depths, thus gaining more radiance than had they been searching singly. Then they yelled and shouted. There was no reply. So they've gone over to one of the caves that goes off the side, and they're calling down there, because I guess they've run out of ideas. On to the next crevice. Didn't say that was a crevice, though. And reached an opening in the rocks. Maybe they're talking about an opening in the floor. I thought they'd got to the edge of the cave. I don't know. On to the next crevice. This, fortunately, was not deep, but although the lights revealed the bottom, and although they played the triple beams along every inch of the floor of the subterranean ravine, there was no sign of a crumpled figure. Patiently they searched the cave, but at last they were forced to admit they were at a standstill. "Not much use going any further just now," sighed Joe. "We need more light." "And which way would they have gone?" He sat down moodily on a rock and buried his face in his hands. "I wish we'd never followed that fellow who was in the cave," said Chet. "Chances are it has cost Frank his life." "I'm not giving up hope yet," Joe declared. "There's a chance he might have been knocked unconscious by his fall, and if we can only reach him in time, we may be able to save him." I think I just saw a flash of lightning. I can definitely hear the rain, and yes, my windows are shut. "There's a chance he might have been knocked unconscious by his fall, and if we can only reach him in time, we may be able to save him. But these flashlights aren't much help. We're just groping around in the dark." "I've an idea," offered Biff. "What is it?" "Let's build a fire. It might light up the cave enough to show us what we're doing." "How can we light a fire?" asked Chet. Then he looked up sharply. "You're right, Biff. I forgot that we have lots of wood in the outside cave." "That's not a bad stunt," declared Joe hopefully. "Oh, that rain's starting to get loud. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Probably not when I'm not talking because of the noise gate, but you can. When I'm talking, you're probably hearing noise in the background from the rain. With a roaring bonfire in here, we'll be able to light up the whole place and see what we're about. Let's get at it." Biff's plan seemed valuable, but before leaving the cave in search of wood, the boys made a last attempt to locate their missing comrade by shouting loudly. However, as before, there was not the faintest reply. They made their way out into the next cave, and from there into the outer cavern. How did they know which one to go through? There were all of these openings around the edge. They've already told us that. No, this is the middle cave. There were all these openings around the edge. We don't know if there were in this big one, but apparently they just walked through the one that they were next to, and there they were in the right place. From there into the outer cavern where they had originally taken refuge from the storm, they were harassed by the thought that death might have overtaken their missing companion, and they said scarcely a word as they went about the business of gathering driftwood for the proposed bonfire. Each of them took an armful of the wood, and they were just about to return through the caves again when Joe noticed something that caused him to drop his wood on the floor with a clatter. "What's wrong now?" asked Chet with surprise. "That's funny," Joe returned. "I was sure we left our supplies right near this woodpile." "So we did," Biff assured him. "They're not here now," All of their supplies. They must be. I piled them there myself, all except a few that I put over by the other wall. Come and see for yourself. Joe turned the beam of his flashlight on the place where Biff had stacked the greater part of their supplies. A loaf of bread and a tin of sardines lay on the rock, but that was all. Biff's astonishment was so great that he could scarcely speak for a moment. Then he gasped, "They've been stolen! We've been burglarized." Sorry, we were having a joke about that the other day at home. All of them? Demanded Chet in alarm. The loss of their provisions would be a serious matter to him. "Where did you put the rest of that stuff, Biff?" asked Joe. Biff turned his flashlight on the opposite wall. There the light revealed a few bundles and tins, the rest of the supplies. "Well, they're safe at any rate." "But where are the others? They can't be stolen. They were here when we went to sleep." "Why can't they be stolen?" "Must have been stolen while we were in the other caves," declared Chet. "But who would have taken them?" asked Joe. "Well, whoever was making the footsteps and everything else. The chap who woke us up, I'll bet he didn't go into the other caves at all, or if he did, he just hid himself until we passed. Then he came out and stole our food." "Perhaps that was what he came for in the first place," suggested Biff. Solemnly the lads looked from the loaf of bread and the tin of sardines on the floor of the cave to the few things on the other side. "He sure didn't leave much." "This means we'll have to go back to the village," said Chet, a bit impatiently. "We can't take time to worry about that now," Joe reminded him. "We have to keep up our search for Frank." "That's right," added Biff. "It's tough to lose our food, but we have enough to last us another day anyway, if that doesn't get stolen. And it's more important to get Frank back than our supplies." "Of course it is," agreed Chet soberly. The boys picked up their firewood again, and with Joe... I would be making sure that I had all my supplies with me at all times at this point. Even if it meant I couldn't carry as much firewood, I would take 2 trips. I would not be leaving the rest of the supplies there, especially since we've just been hollering about the fact that we still have some. The boys picked up their firewood again and with Joe in the lead went into the second cave, then on into the cavern where their chum had vanished. As they trudged on through the darkness following the gleam of the flashlights, Chet and Biff wondered vainly about the thief who had disturbed them and robbed them. Joe's agonized thoughts circled about his vanished brother. The end of the chapter. So what do you reckon? How does it tie in to why they were even going where they were going? I'm sorry, I'm going to have the last piece of my lunch, a piece of cold roast potato. Right. Better have a mouthful of different water. A mouthful of water, because that one looks like it's going to run out. Actually, we've got an ad in 23 seconds. I'm going to dash off to the loo, and I'll be back, hopefully before the end of the ad. So just bear with me. I'll be back in a minute. And welcome back. Perfect TV advert timing. I'm wondering why this is doing this over here.
Too much dark, shadowy spots.
Yeah, but I usually have it there without this. Yeah, but that's where I usually have my green screen.
Okay, well...
Yeah, but it's my same green screen. Why does it not work normally?
Weird.
Very weird.
Hello, everyone.
Guitar Tech. Coffee Boy. PJ. Thank you. Right. Back to the next chapter. I didn't fill it up again. I just had to go to the loo. But look. Let's hope there's not too many more rocks. I hope you got to the loo in time too. Let's carry on. Chapter 14. Captain Royal. Captain Royal. Sounds like a pirate. When the three boys reached the cave where they had last seen Frank Hardy, they piled the driftwood in a heap close by one of the pits in the floor. They were surprised at the number of holes and crevices they had discovered. So they probably haven't checked all of them yet. "It's a wonder we weren't all killed," said Chet. "We were all prowling around this cave without any idea of the danger." But surely they had their torches pointing at the ground, and if you can see a hole in front of you, you don't still walk into it. "It's a good place to stay out of," Joe remarked. "But first of all, we'll try to get Frank out of it too." He was trying to be hopeful, but it was difficult. The ominous silence since his brother's disappearance had been none too encouraging. They lit the fire. In a short time the flames flared high, and a flickering radiance illuminated the cave, revealing the damp ceiling high above, the clammy walls in the distance, and the rough floor seamed and pitted with cracks and holes in the rock. Methodically they resumed their search, investigating each of these giant crevices, but in spite of all their shouts, in spite of the fact that they were enabled to make a more thorough search now the cave was not as dark as it had been, in spite of the fact that Joe even descended one of the shallower pits on the chance that Frank might be lying unconscious at the bottom, their search was in vain. "I'm afraid it's no use," said Biff finally. "I hate to give up," declared Joe, "and yet we've done all we can." "Better have some sleep and try again tomorrow," Chet suggested. "Frank is either unconscious or dead." Some of these pits seemed terribly deep. Joe realised that the advice was reasonable. They were all very tired and in no condition to continue the search. As Chet said, if Frank were alive or conscious, he would have shouted to them. Unless he was being held captive, then he would not. "All right," agreed Joe. "We'll go back to the other cave, but I'm afraid I'll never be able to sleep. We'll have to rest anyway. Then we'll come back. If we still can't find him, we'll go back to the village and get some men to help us with ropes and big searchlights. We'll never go back to Bayport until we find out what's happened to him." Disconsolately, the boys turned away. They were almost at the entrance of the second cave when they heard a faint sound. That's what we've all been expecting. Joe wheeled about. What was that? They listened. The sound was repeated. It was like a distant cry. "Somebody's calling," declared Biff excitedly. "It must be Frank." The boys stood quite still and listened for a repetition of the call. It came again, muffled and far away, but unmistakably a human voice. With one accord they turned and ran back into the cave. "It's Frank!" They hurried across the treacherous floor in the direction of the sound. It was clearer now. "Joe! Joe!" They recognised Frank's voice. The call came from a part of the cave that they had not searched carefully. Joe shouted back excitedly, "We hear you, Frank! Call again so we'll know where to find you." Again came the faint shout. It guided them toward a pit that was almost hidden from view by a huge boulder. It was one of the few pits that they had overlooked. Of course, otherwise they would have found him. Evidently Frank had seen the reflection of their searchlights, for he shouted weakly, "Right over here!" At the edge of the pit they looked down. There, just a blur in the gloom, they distinguished a figure. Frank was standing up, leaning against the side of the rocky shaft, just a few yards below. Rocky. Chet had brought with him a length of stout rope. Why do we not use this earlier on? And he quickly flung one end of this down into the pit. We'll have you out of there in no time. Boy, but it's good to hear your voice again. There was heartfelt relief in his tones. Frank explained that the sides of the pit were too steep to enable him to make his way to the surface without assistance. However, with the aid of the rope, and with Joe and his chums pulling lustily, he was soon hauled to the top. I'm guessing he was injured. There is actually an illustration here, but I can't make it any bigger or anything. No. He was hauled to the top. Soon hauled to the top, sorry. As he scrambled up out of the pit, the others noticed in the glow of the fire that he had a nasty gash across his temple. "You're hurt," said Joe, when the first exclamations of enthusiasm and delight had died down. "I'm all right now," Frank assured them. "I'm a little dizzy yet, and weak, but it isn't serious." "What happened?" "I fell down the pit, and I struck my head against the rocks. It must have knocked me out for a few minutes, but when I came to, I began to shout." "A few minutes?" exclaimed Chet. "We've been hunting for you for over an hour." Frank looked incredulous. "An hour? Why, I thought I'd only been unconscious a little while." The others then told him of the search they had made and of their anxiety on his account. However, they were so relieved at seeing him safe and sound again that they soon forgot the serious side of the affair, and Chet remarked that Frank had been lucky in having an hour's sleep while the rest had been shouting their lungs out. They trooped out of the cavern back toward their own cave, and Joe told his brother about the missing supplies. "That's odd," said Frank. "Were they stolen while we were in the big cave?" "It looks like that. But the man who woke us up went into the big cave ahead of us. He may have hidden, and we might have passed him." "That's possible. Perhaps it wasn't a man at all. The thief might have been an animal." The others had not considered this explanation. "Do we have bears?" "No use crying over spilt milk now," declared Frank. "We'd better go back to sleep and hunt for our supplies in the morning, after we secure the remaining supplies that we have, I think." When morning came, a diligent search of the cave failed to reveal any clues that would help the boys trace the thief, whether man or animal. "We're out of luck, that's all," concluded Frank finally. "Our friend must have fooled us nicely. Perhaps he came into the cave to steal supplies in the first place, then slipped past us in the darkness when we went to look for him." "And helped himself," said Chet gloomily. "He left something at any rate. We won't starve today, and if our grub runs out, we can go back to the village for more. We'll make the best of it. Let's start exploring the shoreline. That's what we came for." Why are they I thought their intention was to search the caves. That's why they had come to this area, is because of the caves. "Let's start exploring the shoreline. That's what we came for." The matter of the stolen supplies was thus dismissed, although Chet was very gloomy for some time as he thought of the food that had been taken, notably a tin of strawberry jam, of which he was inordinately fond. The storm was over, and from the cave they could see the sun shining on the blue waters of the sea. They lost no time in eating breakfast and then hastening down to the beach. Although they were dubious as to the advisability of leaving their remaining supplies in the cave, they reasoned that it was impossible to take the provisions everywhere with them. They would have to run the risk of further theft. As it was, impossible. Out on the beach, beneath the lowering black cliffs, the ones that were looking ominous above them, they forgot the unfortunate beginning of their quest in the delight of the keen, salty air and the cool breeze from the sea. The sandy shore wound about the face of a great bluff of black rock, and when the boys had skirted this precipice, they were confronted by a dark opening at the base of the cliffs just a few yards away. "Another cave," exclaimed Frank. Chet gave a cheer. "Let's investigate." They advanced on the cave, but when they were just in front of the entrance, they halted with exclamations of surprise. Tacked on a board stuck in the sand beside the cave mouth was a tattered fragment of paper. On it, in black letters scrawled with a heavy pencil, they read, "No trespassing." Remember one of the boys had said, "There's no sign to say we can't come in here," when they found the other cave? The boys looked at this sign in astonishment. "By order of the Chief of Police," murmured Chet with a grin. "Looks as if somebody's been here before," Biff observed. "Perhaps somebody just put up the sign for a joke. Let's take a peep inside." Frank advanced toward the cave. But at the entrance he paused. He peered into the gloomy beyond and then turned back to his companions. "The sign isn't a joke," he said quietly. "Somebody lives here." "Lives here?" ejaculated Chet incredulously. "Come and see for yourself." Curiously, the lads crowded into the entrance of the cave. They saw at a glance that Frank was right. In the gloomy interior of the cave they could see a crude table, a mattress with blankets, and on a ledge of rock was an improvised cupboard consisting of an old soapbox. That the cave had only been recently tenanted they saw by the fact that the box held some canned goods and some other provisions that certainly had not been here long. "Well, I'll be switched," declared Joe. "We have a neighbour." "We certainly have, and if I'm not mistaken, here he comes now." Frank looked down the beach. The others turned. "What a queer duck he is," exclaimed Biff. "I'll say he is," said Chet Morton. "Where do they get him like that?" Coming round a jutting promontory of rock was an odd old man clad in fisherman's garb, with a huge straw hat on his head. He had not seen them as yet. He was singing in a high-pitched voice, and even at that distance they could make out the words, "I'm Captain Royal of the King's Navy, and I want 2 lumps of sugar in me tea." And that's the end of the chapter. Chapter 15, The Old Sailor. So I'm guessing that's this one? The guy? Having concluded this verse, the strange old man elevated one arm above his head and danced a couple of steps of a sailor's hornpipe. In the middle of this, he caught sight of the boys and came to an abrupt stop. "Ahoy!" he shouted. "Ahoy!" cried Chet promptly. The man in the straw hat advanced. "When did you come ashore?" "Just this morning." The old man drew closer. He was an odd figure in the flopping straw hat, with oilskins much too big for him, rainwear, raincoats and hats and things. And as he came up to the mouth of the cave, he looked closely at the lads, then smiled and extended his hand. "I'm Captain Royal," he announced. "You should have saluted, but I guess you didn't know." To make up for this breach of etiquette, the boys saluted, and this appeared to gratify the old gentleman immensely. "You're landlubbers, eh?" "I suppose so," admitted Frank with a smile. "Well, we can't all be sailors. It isn't often people come to see me." "Do you live here?" asked Joe, indicating the cave. "This is where I live when I'm ashore. I'm resting up between cruises now." The old man sat down on the sand and fanned himself with the straw hat, for it was a warm morning and the sun was strong. The boys looked at him curiously. In spite of his garb, he did not look like a seafaring man. His skin was tanned, it is true, but it was not the deep mahogany tan of one who has lived for years in many different climates. His voice was high-pitched and his expression was mild, but the boys were old enough to know that one cannot always judge by appearances. "What are your names?" asked the old man. The lads introduced themselves. "Glad to meet you," returned Captain Royal. That was a bit of thunder. It ain't often I have visitors. I get used to being alone." "It's lonely enough here," agreed Frank. "'Tisn't bad. Not half as lonely as the time I got marooned in the South Seas." The boys looked at him with new interest. "You were marooned?" It was when I was in charge of a destroyer cruising the South Seas a good many years ago. We landed for water on a little island that you won't find on any of the maps. It was a hot day, very hot. Must have been over 100 degrees in the shade. So while my men were loading the water on my boat, I sat down in the shade of a cactus tree. Before I knew it, I was asleep." "And they went away and left you?" "They did." "But you were the captain." I guess they thought I was in me cabin, and of course none of 'em dared disturb me. When I woke up, the ship was gone. Gosh, said Biff. So eloquent, so eloquent. It's inspiring, Biff. Well, sir, I didn't know what to do. I was like this here Robinson Crusoe that you read about, but I had to make the best of it, so I fixed myself up a little house, and I lived there for nearly 6 months all by myself. Didn't the boat come back for you? They couldn't find the island again. It wasn't marked on the maps. The engineer couldn't set a course back to the island. It's not the engineer who does that, it's the navigator. Anyway, the quartermaster who took charge of the schooner after they found I was gone didn't want to find me, I guess. He wanted my job. Quartermaster? He's the guy in charge of supplies. Should be the first mate who takes charge when the captain's not there. Because it goes captain, first mate, second mate, and then you work your way down through the different ranks and jobs. How did you find anything to eat when you were on the island? Oh, there was lots to eat. Coconuts and prunes and bananas and grapefruit and figs and all sorts of fruit. There was plenty of mud turtles on the island, so I had mock turtle soup whenever I wanted it. I tell you, I lived high. Once in a while I had me little troubles, of course, and 2 or 3 times I had some mighty narrow escapes. Prunes. They're a dried fruit. You don't pick them off a tree. Those are plums. There was a rhinoceros came after me once. A rhinoceros? Aye, he swam up to the island one day. I was just in for me morning swim when I saw his big ears flapping. Rhinoceros have these little tiny ears, like Shrek's ears. I saw his big ears flapping and heard him give a roar. I tell you, I was scared. He came surging through the waves and up on the beach, and he chased me clean up a pineapple tree. Pineapples grow out of the centre of a bunch of spiky leaves that grow on the ground, and they only grow about this big. Straight up a pineapple tree. I had to stay there for 3 days until he went away, and I had nothing but pineapples to eat. And you only get one pineapple per plant. I was never so sick of pineapples in my life. I've never been able to eat one since. Frank glanced at his brother. He was beginning to suspect that Captain Royal was having some fun at their expense. The old man rattled on. The rhinoceros finally swam out to sea again, and I was able to come down. I lived on that island for half a year, hoping that my warship would come back, but it never did. So I made myself a raft and loaded it up with water and fruit and finally sailed away. Took me more than a month of steady sailing before I finally reached the land off the coast of South America. By jing, I was glad when I saw the Andes Mountains again. I landed at a port where there was a ship, and I'm swizzled if it wasn't my own boat. Your own boat? Yes, sir, I could hardly believe my eyes. I come on board and they were going to throw me off. Why? Asked Chet in surprise. They didn't know me, you see. I hadn't been able to shave when I was on the island, and I'd grown a beard. So nobody knew me, and they wouldn't believe me when I said I was their captain, but I told them to lend me a pair of scissors and a razor, and I took off that beard and stepped out on deck, and by jing, they all saluted me then. I can tell you, I made the quartermaster walk the plank, and we all sailed back to San Francisco. That's quite an adventure, said Frank politely. Oh, I've had many things happen to me. I've been in a lot of battles too. Of course, I've retired from the Navy now, for there isn't the excitement nowadays. Were you in the Spanish-American War? Asked Chet. I was all through it from start to finish. I had a narrow escape during that war. I took my ship out one night off the Philippines to see if I could catch a Spanish warship that I'd heard was in the neighbourhood, and we sighted her just about midnight, not half a mile away. This is across the other side of the Pacific. Now, the Pacific is the biggest ocean on the planet. So, you know, he went from the Americans, the coast of the Americas, over to the Philippines, because there was and we sighted her just about midnight, not half a mile away. So he pumped a couple of shots over her keel. The keel's the bit along the bottom, under the water. We pumped a couple of shots over her keel, and she turned and went steaming away to the north. Well, I gave chase, but the Spaniard was fast, and it was 3 hours before we came alongside. We were just going aboard the ship when the steward came up to me and said some other boats were coming up. There was 5 of them, all Spanish. What did you do? What could I do? I couldn't run away. I told my men to get on board the Spaniard, and I took all the sailors from that boat and made them surrender and put them on my ship. So the other boats didn't dare fire at my ship for fear of killing their own men, and they didn't dare fire at the boat I was on for fear of sinking their own ship. So we opened fire on them, and they didn't dare fire a shot back. That was mighty clever. It's actually not usually the way it works. They just fire anyway. Wasn't it? I sunk 2 of the Spaniards and the others surrendered, and I brought him back to Manila Bay. I was given a medal for that. Yep, Manila is in the Philippines. We've got this bit correct. Captain Royal looked very pleased with himself, and he dug into a capacious pocket and produced a plug of tobacco, taking a huge bite. So he uses it as chewing tobacco. Oh, I've had experiences, he said, wagging his head. Are you going to be around here long? Just a few days. I'd invite you to come and live in my cave, only there ain't much room. We have a cave of our own further down the shore. That's fine. I'll call and see you sometime. We'll be glad to have you do that, said Joe cordially. The old man got up and walked toward the entrance of his own cave. Come on inside, he urged. You'd better stay and have some dinner with me. I was out fishing this morning and I caught quite a few fish. As soon as they're ready, we'll sit down to eat. The boys accepted the invitation eagerly and trooped into the cave of Captain Royal. Chet looked around hungrily for the fish, but there was none in sight. The old man invited them to sit down, and they squatted in the sand, there being no chairs or boxes. Are you the only person living around here, Captain Royal? Asked Frank. The only one. I thought I was the only person who knew about these caves until I saw you lads here. There was someone visited us last night, began Frank. Then he hesitated in surprise, for Captain Royal leapt to his feet, a look of fear on his face. So he's hiding out here from somebody. He doesn't want anyone to know he's here. He thinks the boys are safe, but the boys are now telling him about somebody he doesn't know of, which means he might be in danger for some reason. What's that? He exclaimed. Someone visited you. Don't tell me there's someone else around here. It's the end of the chapter. I don't know. We'll read the next one, shall we? 11 pages. Yeah, I think we've got enough time. Chapter 16. Go away. Lovely. Someone came into our cave last night and stole most of our supplies, said Frank. A man? We didn't see him, but it could scarcely have been an animal of any kind, for he carried off a whole box of food. You don't say, exclaimed Captain Royal. And we found a footprint too, said Joe. Captain Royal shook his head in amazement. This is very strange. I had no idea there was anyone else around this part of the coast. You can see for yourself that it's hard to get here, and if there was anyone else around, I would be sure to see him. And you've seen no one? Not a living soul besides yourselves, and he stole your supplies? Nearly all of them. He left us some canned beans, a loaf of bread, some butter, and some coffee, but that's about all. Well, he wasn't trying to starve them then. That's long thunder. Still going. Still going. Still faintly. And I think it's gone. Wow, that was a long one. I haven't had any big bright flashes, and I'm happy to not have them because that usually means that the lightning strikes are further away, and it also means I'm less likely to have a power cut. Left us some canned beans, a loaf of bread, some butter and some coffee, but that's about all. Canned beans? It's a long time since I had any canned beans. Perhaps we could trade. That's not a bad idea, said Chet. There are other things we need. I have some dried fish here, said the captain. I have fish and a case of eggs and some other things. Go get those beans and we'll trade. Chet hastened back to the other cave and returned in due time with the cans of beans, which the captain accepted with considerable delight. In exchange, the boys received some fish and 24 eggs. I got the eggs off a boat yesterday, exclaimed Captain Royal, and I've been thinking ever since that it was foolish of me to buy a whole case because they mightn't keep, but I'd rather have canned beans any day. When the exchange was effected, their host suddenly became... That's closer and louder. It's a lot closer. It's a lot more crisp sounding, that one. Oh, you did hear it. Good. It's not that I'm scared of it. It's just that it gave me a fright. You know, when you suddenly, you're not noticing anything and then suddenly there's this loud noise. Now we've got the big heavy sounding one going on, the more rumbly one, rather than the crackly one. Oh my goodness. Their host suddenly became silent and sat for a long time looking gloomily at the sand. The boys were wondering when the promised fish dinner was to put in its appearance. Apparently Captain Royal had forgotten all about his invitation. Suddenly he looked up. "Well," he demanded curtly, "what are you hanging about for, boys?" They gazed at the man in surprise. "Why, you asked us to stay," stammered Frank. "Yes," returned the old man tartly, "but I didn't ask you to stay all day." The boys were so astonished at the sudden change of front that for a moment they thought the captain was joking, but they soon learned that he was in earnest, for he got to his feet with a mutter. "Must I order you out?" "Why, what's the matter?" inquired Joe. "Have we offended you in any way?" "Be off with you! Go away! Get out of here!" The boys got to their feet, vastly surprised. "Go away," repeated Captain Royal, advancing on them with a threatening gesture. "Clear out! I prefer to be alone." "Why, certainly," said Frank. "We had no idea we were disturbing you, Captain." "Don't argue, get out. By jing, I've had enough of you people bothering me lately, and I'm not going to stand for it any longer. I thought when I found this cave that people would leave me alone, and now I'm annoyed by a pack of meddlesome boys. Go away." Without further ado, the boys retreated from the cave. Captain Royal stood in the entrance, shaking his fist at them angrily. That's probably what this picture is about. "Clear out of here," he stormed. "Don't let me catch you around this cave again, or it'll be worse for you." Then he wheeled about abruptly and disappeared into the darkness of the cave. The boys looked at one another in amazement. "Can you beat that?" said Chet. "What's wrong with the old coot anyway?" demanded Biff. "Has he gone crazy?" "I can't understand it," said Frank. "One minute he invites us to stay for dinner, and then the next breath he orders us away." Joe tapped his head significantly. "I think he's a little bit off his head." "Perhaps it's the heat," volunteered Chet. "He's certainly a queer old codger," Biff declared. "Don't know what to make of him." The boys went back down the beach toward their own cave. Fortunately, before he started, Chet had had enough presence of mind to pick up the provisions they had obtained from the old man, so the boys were so much to the good, at any rate. So they've got all these eggs now. "He's crazy," insisted Joe. "Those stories he told us were the wildest yarns I've ever heard in my life. I wonder if he thought we were simple enough to believe them." "As if anybody didn't know that a rhinoceros couldn't swim in the ocean," scoffed Chet. "And pineapples that grow on a tree." "Don't think he's ever been a sailor at all," Frank declared. "His naval terms were certainly mixed. He called his ship a destroyer and a warship and a schooner and didn't seem to notice the difference. And he said the quartermaster was in charge after he left the ship. And everybody knows they don't make people walk the plank nowadays." His stories were as full of holes as a sieve, but I don't know whether he told them just for fun of stuffing us or just because he's clean crazy and doesn't know any better. The boys discussed Captain Royal and his eccentric behaviour all the way back to their cave, and agreed that if the old gentleman was not a lunatic, he was at least slightly unbalanced. "The very fact that he lives away off here all by himself proves it," insisted Joe. "No man in his right mind would live in a cave down in this lonely spot. Wonder if he was the man who came and stole our supplies last night." Frank shook his head. "I thought of that, and I took a look around his cave, but there was no sign of any of our stuff. Besides, he seemed quite surprised when we told him there was someone else hanging around." "He might have been smart enough to act as though he was surprised. Perhaps he had our provisions hidden away. But why would he want to trade with us? Because he's crazy?" The lads went back to their own cave and then went for a swim in the surf, forgetting Captain Royal in their enjoyment of the stimulating salt water. In spite of the generally rocky nature of the coast, the beach in front of their cave was sandy and sloped gently into the water, providing an ideal bathing place. When the swim was over, they prepared lunch from what limited food they had on hand, and in the afternoon they went back down the shore again to resume their tour of exploration. They did not see the captain again, although they passed his cave, keeping at a respectful distance so as not to incur his wrath. Further down the shore they found a series of large caves, and some of these they explored. However, they found nothing of interest. Although they spent the entire afternoon prowling about the caverns, at sundown they returned, footsore and weary, to their own headquarters. After supper they sat about their campfire, chatting, but Chet and Biff were so tired that their heads soon began to nod, and they decided to retire for the night. Joe would have done likewise, but Frank asked him to sit up a while longer. Biff and Chet were soon snoring, and not until then did Frank broach the subject on his mind. "Did you notice an expression Captain Royal used several times when he was talking to us?" asked his brother. Joe reflected. "Can't say I noticed anything in particular," he confessed. "Don't you remember that he said 'by jing' now and then?" Joe looked up, startled. "Now I remember. Yes, he did say that. And 'by jing' is the very expression Evangeline Todd said her missing brother used so often." "That's a fact," exclaimed Joe. "And now that I come to think of it, I remember his shoelaces. They were untied. And Todd'em Todd had the habit of going about with his shoelaces untied, too." And that's the end of that chapter. I'm hearing the long, slow, not really loud rumbles in the background now. Yeah, let's give it a go, see if we can do one more chapter. Chapter 17, The Man on the Shore. The Hardy Boys looked at one another solemnly in the glow of the campfire. "Do you think Captain Royal and Todd'em Todd are one and the same man?" asked Joe. "What do you think of it yourself? It certainly looks strange. But how could this queer old chap be Todd'em Todd? How would the college professor get away down among these caves? And what would be his idea in passing himself off as a sea captain?" Frank was thoughtful. "Stranger things have happened. You remember that Evangeline Todd suggested that her brother might have lost his memory? He was always more or less eccentric, no doubt, and if he was suffering from amnesia, there's no telling where he might go or what he might do. It is mighty strange if we've run across him in this place. Perhaps it's just a coincidence that Captain Royal says 'by jing' once in a while. And as for having his shoelaces untied, he seems pretty sloppy anyway, and that would only be natural. Oh yes, there's every chance in the world that Captain Royal is simply an eccentric old tar. I agree with you there. Just the same, we can't afford to overlook the chance that he might be Todd'em Todd. How are we going to find out? If we asked him, he would deny it, certainly, but perhaps if we could talk to him and ask a few questions, he might give himself away. If he's lost his memory, he would not remember anything to give away. I hadn't thought of that, admitted Frank. Still, my plan is worth trying, don't you think? Certainly is, but do you think he'll talk to us at all after what happened today? Perhaps he's forgotten all about it by now. He might be as nice as pie if we went back. Yes, he seemed rather changeable. It seemed a rather changeable old boy, laughed Joe. And perhaps if he isn't around, we might find some clue in that cave of his. Now, if he's had a head injury, this is all very unexceptional. Their moods can quite strongly swing to the point of almost being another person when they've had a bad head injury, and I think that was implied somewhere along the line. Good idea. We'll make a try at it tomorrow. Hang on, where did we get to? He seems a rather changeable old boy, laughed Joe, and perhaps if he isn't around, we might find some clue in that cave of his. So where would he be going if he's not in this cave? Good idea. We'll make a try at it tomorrow. Do you think we should tell Chet and Biff? Asked Joe. I don't think so. Not just yet. After all, they don't know about the Todd affair, and if we find out that our suspicions are all wrong, there'll be no harm done, and they'll be none the wiser. But how can we question him if they're with us? We'll make some excuse to get away by ourselves. Of course, we may be disappointed. The more I think of it, the more impossible it seems that Todd'em Todd should actually be living here. But it is strange that he hasn't been found before this, if he's living in any town or city where people would meet him and talk about him. Yeah, well, if he's actively avoiding it, this would be ideal, wouldn't it? Dad said he was traced as far as Claymore, and there the trail vanished. Claymore isn't very far from this coast. That's right, he may have wandered down to these caves. How about the shooting and the mysterious lights we were warned about? Frank laughed. Oh, as to that, I think Captain Royal has just been having a little fun at the expense of the people around here. Perhaps he's trying to keep people from finding out too much about him. Well, we'll find out all we can anyway. He can't scare us. Having decided to investigate the eccentric old gentleman further, the Hardy boys rolled themselves up in their blankets and went to sleep. Frank hardly dared hope that his surmise was correct, and that in Captain Royal they had discovered the missing college professor, but he was convinced that the old man was not a sailor, in spite of his claims, and the circumstances of the exclamation, "By Jing," and the untied shoelaces, slender as the clues were, led him to believe that they were at least on a trail worth following. When the boys awakened next morning, they found the sea hidden by a dense fog. It was damp and cold, and the weather put all idea of further exploration of the coast out of their heads. "I'm not going to wander around among the rocks in this fog," declared Chet emphatically. I wouldn't either. "If it got worse, we would have a fine time finding our way back here. Looks to me like a good morning for fishing," said Biff. Chet greeted this suggestion with enthusiasm. "That's the brightest idea you've had in years. We brought lots of tackle with us, thank goodness, and there's a high rock over there that hangs over the deep water. Perhaps we could catch a whale or so for lunch. Frank and Joe saw their opportunity. They encouraged their two chums to go fishing. As for themselves, they said they'd go down to Captain Royal's cave and see if the old gentleman was in a better humour than he had been the previous day. "You're welcome," said Chet. "I've had enough of that old lad's society to last me the rest of my life. He'll probably set his dog on you if he has one." "Didn't see any dog there yesterday," grinned Joe. "Well, he'll likely have a dogfish then. You want to be careful. Better come fishing with us." But the Hardy boys persisted in their determination to beard the lion in his den again, as Frank put it. So Biff and Chet unpacked the fishing tackle and made their plans for the morning's sport. After breakfast they set out for the high rock, Chet ironically asking the Hardy boys to give his love to Captain Royal, and Frank and Joe started off down the beach, delighted that they had escaped so easily. They proceeded along the beach. The fog hung low over the sea, and it was so dense that they could scarcely distinguish the outline of the dark cliffs above them. Hang on, what was the chapter called again? I don't know, it's only got numbers in the table of contents. They could scarcely distinguish the outline of the dark cliffs above. "Not much chance of catching Captain Royal away from home today, I'm thinking," said Frank. "No, he's likely sitting in his cosy little cave beside a good fire. Well, he may feel more like talking." "That's a thought. He might be more talkative if it's a gloomy day." There was no breeze blowing, and the sea lay calm and slaty, the colour of slate, beneath the fog. It was a damp, clammy morning, and the chill penetrated to the bone. The boys felt rather guilty at having left Chet and Biff to set out on this expedition of their own, but as Frank had pointed out, it was, after all, private business. They well knew that if their suspicions were incorrect, Chet would joke about the affair unmercifully. It was better to keep it to themselves until they were certain of their ground. They were just approaching the cliff that hid Captain Royal's cave from view when Frank halted and peered through the fog at the base of the rocks some distance ahead. "Do you see somebody lying there, Joe?" Joe looked in the direction he indicated. "Looks like an old dog." "No, it moved." "No, an old log." "No, it moved." "Seems like a man sprawled in the sand. Perhaps it's Captain Royal. Maybe he fell and hurt himself." The boys hastened across the rocks in the direction of the figure on the shore. As they drew near, they saw that it was indeed a man who lay sprawled at the base of the rocks, apparently asleep. However, they soon saw it was not Captain Royal. Perhaps somebody fell off the cliffs from above, ventured Joe, as they hastened up to the recumbent figure. Frank looked up. The cliff loomed high above. If he did, we can't help him now. He'd be dead. They came up to the man, sprawled on the sand. He was not dead. An empty bottle lying by his side told the reason for his slumber. He's drunk. The man's face was turned away from them, and the boys could not distinguish his features. He was roughly dressed, and his clothes were wet with fog. Just then the fellow stirred restlessly in his drunken sleep. He slowly turned his head. When the boys saw his face, they gasped with surprise. "It's Carl Shorm!" exclaimed Frank. Was indeed the escaped automobile thief, the man who'd stolen Frank's motorcycle the day the boys left Bayport. And that's the end of the chapter. And the end of today's reading, because it's now 3:01 and we finish at 3 o'clock-ish. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. We shall have more of the Hardy Boys next time. We will be starting with chapter 18, which is called The Prisoner. There you go. So thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care of yourselves. Be